Hi, this is Carol Atkinson, past president of IE-CAMFT now, and still marketing our presenters' videos. And I am here to introduce Jennifer Allen to you. And I would love for you to introduce yourself. So can you tell us about yourself?
Sure. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in Carmel, California. I'm also a registered board certified art therapist. And more recently, in 2018, I participated in the CIIS, the California Institution of Integral Studies. I can't quite remember it right now, but it's in San Francisco, and it does the psychedelic therapies and research program. It's a certificate program, about a year long. And so now I'm practicing ketamine assisted psychotherapy as well. So that's been new in my repertoire of specializations in the last few years.
Yeah, and like I said, I looked at your website because I'm like, well, this stuff ain't legal in California. So what's going on with this? I mean, I'm like, we're not in Oregon. I have a feeling it will be legal at some point, just like everything else seems to be going that direction. However, when I looked at and read that you were doing the ketamine, that I'm fully aware of. We use on some of my DID clients, and some of the more. I'm a trauma expert, so with that, there's a lot of those bigger cases that medicated maybe too much as far as I'm concerned. But with that said, when I was looking at your objectives, it talks about the history. So can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, well, there was a lot of research done early on, like in the 50s and 60s, like 40,000 research papers on LSD, and with really positive results for mental health, for alcoholism. And then, of course, the Vietnam War came, and it wasn't conducive to have young people expand their consciousness, and so you can't make good soldiers out of those people. So
Mm,
for multiple reasons, and it's complex. Politics overlapped with science there, and Nixon closed everything down, partly because LSD got out on the streets instead of in the laboratory, and it started to be used recreationally, and it was creating a movement that wasn't conducive to a war. So he scheduled, despite all of the evidence on the contrary, he scheduled LSD and other psychedelics to Schedule 1, which means they're illegal and they're deemed addictive and have no health benefits, all of which wasn't true, but that's what he did. And so the next 40 or so years were spent, that was 1970. Well, so it was like 20 years, 20, we're still, coming out of that. So we're almost 50 years later. And the first 20 years, they were absolutely all underground, and research started back in the early 90s, where the FDA approved some
mm.
studies with cancer patients just to get the ball rolling so that we could start using these really important tools and allies for our well-being, especially mental health issues.
Yeah, I was thinking of Timothy OLeary and all the stuff that he did back in the day that people hear about him. And honestly, I can't really remember all of that, but what was that, 70s, 60s?
Yeah, I think that was 60s leading up to 70. He really put he did two things. One, he put psychedelics on the map, but he kind of went too far in a direction that created a problem. It created too much casual use and not enough preparation or integration. And so he took it kind of out of the scholarly and the studies and
Mhm.
onto the streets more because of his own, I guess, personal experience with those substances, and how expansive and mind opening it was for him. But then he wanted everybody else to have that same experience in a way that we culturally we weren't quite ready for that level of expansion. So we couldn't hold that experience very well, and it feels like this round I'm really hoping that we can do this well and right enough so that culturally our psyches can hold this, and receive the benefit from it. So he's kind of a mixed bag. People have different feelings about what how Timothy Leary contributed to the field.
Yeah, I mean, kind of think of him as a hippie.
Yeah.
You know, whether or not that's true or not. I'm I watched Goop Lab, and they did that in Jamaica, I think it was, with therapists there. And I think they were doing a psilocybin. And for those of you that don't know that, like, that's a mushroom, and, you know, put it in tea. And then it was interesting to watch them work through their trauma with a therapist for each person that was there. Was really interesting for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely fascinating work. And I also specialize in trauma and grief. And so for me, these medicines have been game changers in this field with PTSD. You know, I thought initially when I got trained for EMDR, I thought this is a game changer, and it was and is. However, psychedelics applied to especially PTSD are game changer on a whole other level. And oftentimes I use EMDR in the integration aspect of the sessions, not during the medicine, but following it. There's integration sessions, which are
Mhm.
critical for to get the most out of the situation. I'm not sure if what you watched, if you were watching actively with the medicine, or if it was after in the like as they were coming down in the integration phase, or in weeks to follow in
Yeah,
the.
they show the whole thing for that few hours, like 4 or 5 hours of them processing their trauma,
Ah,
whatever that happened to be. I like to call it life, you know, because a lot of people do not identify with that as trauma. But then I think about all the people that are microdosing today and using today, and you know, it is so prevalent now more than ever, at least in my own experience. I mean, I have 3 adult kids. I hear about this stuff. Am I right or wrong?
well, yeah, there's definitely a psychedelic renaissance, and there's a lot getting put out in media. I mean, the New York Times alone is just like almost weekly there for a while, especially with ketamine. And it's exciting that we have like all these studies coming out with amazing results, especially at MAPS, which is working with MDMA for PTSD, and they're in their phase 3 clinical studies, which hopefully will follow the medical legalization of MDMA will follow that. And MDMA is one of the ingredients in what is oftentimes called
Ecstasy.
ecstasy,
Mhm.
but it isn't the only ingredient, which is an important discernment. So yes, it's definitely out there. The microdosing movement is definitely happening. There's less research on that in terms of outcome, but like in a randomized controlled study versus a you know case studies. There's a lot of case studies of people improving. People report that they feel better. You know, psilocybin or LSD in a microdose
Yeah.
um, can be really helpful. Now it is tricky, like you said. They're not legal yet, at least where I live. They're decriminalized in like Santa Cruz and Oakland,
Yeah.
and Oregon and Colorado and different places. But the we're not there yet in terms of people are using them anyway, just like they always kind of do and have. It's just
Mhm.
I think in some ways it's more open and acceptable, but me as a therapist, I'm not doing that work, even though some people will choose to do that work, and we call that the underground. It
Mhm.
just means you choose to do this work because you don't want to wait for the system to finally make it legal when there's people that need help now.
Yes.
So there are plenty of people doing that work. I'm not, but because I can use ketamine and it's very effective
Mhm.
for things, and I'm also really looking forward to the legalization of psilocybin and MDMA so that those can be part of the tools that I can use. In the meanwhile, like I say, people always have been able to get these things, and they probably always will. It's just they're getting more education about how to use them and the importance of setting, and integration, which are
Mhm.
critical factors. And I think that'll be the difference in how we're able to make the most of these now, and not have them go sideways again.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I am not somebody that's ever done anything like that, but I I use CBD all the time for pain, and um, and what I use is helpful. I wouldn't say it's, crazy. There's nothing that you feel different of other than lessening of the pain. The idea of tripping scares me, I'll be honest with you, because I do come from a lot of trauma. That being said, I am an EMDR specialist. I am a brain spotter and a Havener. So, these kinds of other treatments that I use, especially now, brain spotting is more my go-to. But all of these kinds of ideas, little by little, I get lots of calls now for EMDR. Most people don't understand brain spotting, but that's kind of almost all the EMDR clinicians. When I go to the presentations, most of them are EMDR clinicians that are kind of maybe integrating the both of them. That's what I do with brain spotting and havening. But it's all the same language. It's all the same work. It's just getting to a different part of your brain, maybe. But the idea, to get to that subcortical part, that the reptilian part of our brain that's taking our brain hijacked, and the amygdala, like Moses called her Amy, the troublemaker, that hijacks our brain. It sounds like you're doing all of that stuff.
So imagine that, like for instance, with MDMA, with PTSD, think about the amygdala and how, we're counting on the bilateral stimulation to make that a little bit more accessible and calmer. But
Mhm.
MDMA, for instance, will turn the volume down on the amygdala and the fight or flight response enough so that the person still has full capacity of their emotions. They still have, in fact, sometimes even greater memory recall.
Mhm.
So they can visit the trauma memory without having the fight or flight get stimulated.
Right.
And yet they can feel the full spectrum of emotion. So can you imagine having a tool like that to work with?
I think the setting would make a big difference for me. Just the fact that I know that there's an expert there that knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't even begin to, do enough literature or searching to understand that. But I think that setting really, like you said, I think would make a huge difference.
Yeah, it really does. And to have someone who's trained specifically in the therapy with the psychedelic. And MAPS does their own training for MDMA specifically, which overlapped with the training that I did at CIS. So I'm still in the bottleneck last part of the MAPS training, but I've got the 4 of the 5 done. But interesting, when the MDMA is medically legalized, the prescription will include working with a psychedelic therapist that's been trained in that particular medicine.
That's good. That gives me a lot of almost a surety, because like I told you, I've been very interested. I don't know about you. I found that any therapist I know has either gone through something or seen something. That's why we want to help. And so, we all have our story. And with that said, I know that this is going to be a topic of interest to the people that are members, as well as a lot of guests. Sometimes we have more guests than members that go to these trainings. It's kind of interesting. Anyway, guys, this is going to be June 24th, 9 to 11. And keep in mind that we do have our on-demand library. So if for some reason you can't make it during that time, we will have that offering up there at some point for her training to, you'll take a test and you'll get your CEUs that way if that's what you need. And otherwise, Jennifer, I'm really looking forward to this, to learn something that is just so relevant to what, especially with COVID. I mean, people were stuck in their houses, and I believe there was so much more drugs and alcohol use during that time. And, it kind of remains, at least that's what I see.
Right, and that we can talk more about that in the presentation, but some of these medicines are really critical, useful with addiction.
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, that would be good because there's a big problem. And that's one of my specialties as well as addiction. And it all goes with trauma, right? You know, however you choose to manifest. Anyway, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and complete this video, and we look forward to seeing you at the presentation. And please have a safe day and continue to remain safe. You know, these are times that, you know, we don't know what we're looking for anymore. But anyway, with that said, I will stop recording.